Liliana and Augusto, and together we are Real Consulting. Today we'll be focusing on the issue of severe storms in Brisbane, Australia. As a result of rising carbon emissions, these extreme weather events have become more prevalent, and the greatest barrier to achieving community resilience in Brisbane is information access. The key issues we have identified are the lack of resources and early storm warnings available for vulnerable communities, particularly people experiencing homelessness and those sleeping rough, as well as the fact that city populations are often not motivated to act until the threat is imminent. Our recommendation will overcome these concerns by equipping Brisbane with a digital, smart, connected innovation using electronic bus stop advertising and QR codes to provide relevant and actionable information at the right time to those who need it. This will reduce the strain on community and public services while increasing the population's responsiveness to advice. And thanks to the digital nature of the solution, it allows for data analysis to improve services going forward. To implement this strategy, Brisbane City Council can leverage existing resources and partnerships to minimise costs, and a multi-phase rollout will allow for development and refinement of the campaign. With almost 2.5 million inhabitants, Brisbane has the third largest population in Australia, and its dense business centre sees many people commuting by public transport, as well as a large number of people experiencing homelessness and sleeping rough. Our solution will specifically address issues faced by people sleeping rough in the CBD, as well as those commuting for work by public transport, since storms have a large impact on the mental and physical health of these groups. While there are many resources that exist to encourage community preparedness in Brisbane, there are some limitations that need to be addressed to improve the city's resilience. When it comes to city workers, the challenge regarding information access is not in making the resources available, as can be seen here through the well-established Get Ready Queensland campaign and the Red Cross's Get Prepared mobile app. However, there are barriers to acting on this information, given that the sites are often difficult to navigate and involve many steps. The Ask Izzy website provides support to the homeless community. However, it lacks information and warnings for storm events when they're particularly severe. These issues need to be addressed to improve the disaster resilient supply chain. When people experiencing homelessness are not aware of storm events in advance, they seek last-minute shelter or support from the homeless services. These services become inundated, making it more difficult to reach people and meet the needs for shelter and other necessities. Public transport delays mean that the stations and bus stops become crowded, making it even more difficult for rough sleepers to find shelter, thus further increasing the strain on the homeless services. Our solution will overcome these information access problems by coordinating the services provided by different organisations to ensure efficient allocation of resources.
Brisbane is classified as a smart city. However, access to severe storm information is not smart nor connected to the city demographic. Hence, Real Consulting is proposing a digital, connected and smart solution that leverages Brisbane's advanced digital bus stop billboard landscape in conjunction with the world-class storm alert system via the Bureau of Meteorology to simultaneously display to city dwellers storm preparedness information where and when it is required. The street-level display of bus stop billboards means the information can reach Joe, who sleeps beside a bus stop to get shelter from Brisbane's exacerbating heat, Phil, who catches the bus to work and goes past the bus shelter to get lunch, and Alana, who catches the train into the city to shop regularly at Queen Street Mall. These city dwellers will be informed of the incoming storm via a level 1 warning, which will be displayed 3 hours prior to the storm reaching the city and inserted into the advertisement rotation. As seen on the screen, the billboard displays a warning with the universally recognised symbol. This serves all literacy levels. And going beyond a storm alert, the 3 QR codes provide live links to storm preparedness resources that address the most frequently asked questions. Do you have a safe place to go? This QR code will link Joe to Ask Izzy storm resources. These include preparedness advice on how to secure his sleeping bag during high winds or where to get shelter from harsh rains. So Joe will therefore go to the Queen Street car park to stay dry, reducing the need for laundry services the following day. He will also remain calm because he can use the psychological preparedness activities provided. Is your TransLink journey disrupted? This QR code will link Phil to journey disruptions and delays. Therefore, he will decide to stay at work an extra 3 hours and finish a project, instead of adding to the congestion in the city. Do your loved ones have a plan? This QR code will link Alana to the Red Cross Prepared app, which will enable her to make a collective plan with her family and notify her daughter who studies at QUT that a storm is coming and they should leave the city early. Additionally, a level 2 alert will commence 30 minutes prior to the storm impact in Brisbane, and this advertisement will stay on the screen for the whole 30 minutes. The resource will display directions and walking time to the closest shelter and areas to take cover, transferring the information direct from the Ask Izzy website and also utilising oOh!media's geolocation technologies. So this means that if Joe was asleep or missed the earlier warning, he would still be alerted of the storm and be able to follow the clear directions to get shelter before it hits.
Our solution will allow essential and verified information regarding the availability of public services to be within the reach of the city population, helping them to comprehend what to do before, during, and after a storm. Before a storm, people will understand the risks that may affect them and others in their community. They will also take steps to anticipate disasters and to protect themselves and their assets, minimizing in that way physical, economic, and social losses. During the event, people will use their knowledge and resources to prepare for and deal with a disaster. After, people will already know the mechanisms and the process through which recovery assistance may be made available. Second, our research shows that Australian disaster resilience can be improved by facilitating the access of preparedness advice as well as information regarding what type of public and community services are available. According to our data, 9% of the population live in areas with low level of disaster resilience. Furthermore, it was found that information access is a significant barrier to the capacity for disaster resilience in Australia. Therefore, through the QR code, it is expected that communities will engage with natural risk information and the uptake of knowledge needed for preparation, self-reliance, and in that way, improving Australian disaster resilience. Third, using outdoor advertisements ensures that information reaches a large portion of the city population and encourages them to take action. According to our research, 93% of Australians live in or around capital cities. Furthermore, it was reported that people are 2 times more alert and likely to act when they are outside their home. And there is also proof that outdoor advertising increases impact of television and social media campaigns by 23%. Finally, the data capabilities of QR codes and other digital platforms can be used to monitor the success of the strategy and thus use this information to further improve community services. First, the user interacts with the QR code. Second, geographic and demographic data is collected. Third, our partner will analyze the data to provide insight. Fourth, this data will be evaluated by the Brisbane City Council to assess the effectiveness of the campaign. And finally, this data will be used to improve public services.
This is feasibility of our solution. Last year, we know everyone had been through the COVID pandemic. The employer changed their working style. People may think that city commuting isn't an issue with the people working from home now, but the data and stories say otherwise. According to the report by the Outdoor Media Association, Australian workers are returning to their workplace gradually. However, a couple of months ago, people suffer from transport delays due to the severe storms. On the other hand, the data showed that outdoor advertising reached more than 95% of people in 2021. Furthermore, the oOh! Media is always supporting the homeless communities. This campaign will implemented by the Brisbane City Council in cooperation with the Bond to link with the weather warning data and associate with the oOh! Media to demonstrate the warning alerts. The cost will be minimized, but we leverage the existing partnership. Brisbane City Council has a 10 years agreement with the oOh! Media. In addition, the Australian government is supporting X-Easy to build on the connection across a variety of the service. It's also linked with the TransLink and Red Cross to provide real-time transport information and preparedness resources. The implementation timeline has 5 phases, which you can see on the slide. Following the initial rollout, all organizations involved will evaluate the campaign and make adjustments. Due to the flexible nature of this solution, it is replicable across other urban cities. which can tailor it to their specific needs, utilizing their existing sources and local service. And this is our digital, smart, and connected city storm solution. Thank you so much.
Wow, amazing. Congratulations. Okay, so now we have 15 minutes for judging Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to Gyeonggi and all of our judges.
Thank you so much. It's a really, really interesting problem and also a very interesting solution that you put together. And if I got it right, you also learned, apart from the things that you've presented, you took on some learning from Adelaide's heat wave, similar kind of warning system. Can you maybe a bit elaborate on that, like what you can take on from that and what was the challenge maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this. So Adelaide did implement a heat warning alerts through their billboard campaign. However, the limitations with this was that they didn't use live QR links to live resources. They had displayed website links and a mobile phone number. And we actually found that with people experiencing homelessness, they don't really, they can feel quite a bit of shame with having to plug in a phone number or type in a whole URL code. So that's why we are using this similar geolocation technology, but where our solution involves the live QR link to make sure that people that need it feel like they are comfortable to use the information resource.
And you did write that the QR codes are already quite normal, say, or used by that population that you're targeting. So, okay, because that would have been, of course, one of the issues that would be a bit of a concern, like, you know, are people actually able to use these kinds of technologies, and do they have the technology to be able to do so? I have one other big question, which has to do with the fact that you're now focusing on storms. And I understand you focus on storms. I lived in Brisbane at some point, so I actually realize the environment does have the big cyclone warnings and issues like that. But cyclones have this tiny problem that they tend to wipe out electricity and telecom networks, which is not just maybe an issue for your warning system in itself, but also for any of the services behind it that you would access with a QR code. So how do you deal with that?
That's a very good question.
Oh yeah,
I'm happy to answer. Yes, so that is definitely a consideration that needs to be made. I think there are some potential methods of getting around this issue. Firstly, I know that in Brisbane, while we do experience many severe storms, they're not always quite to the level of a cyclone where it does completely wipe out electricity and Wi-Fi services. Another aspect is that the Ask Izzy website doesn't require Wi-Fi to be used when the mobile user is on a Telstra or Vodafone network. The other insight I can provide into this issue is that while the initial solution is to use the electronic billboards, there is also a possibility in the future to leverage the still versions of the billboards that O Media also owns, where before the storm season, for example, these QR codes can be displayed so people can access the information before the storm season and be prepared in that sense. And then on the day of the actual storm, just relying on those last minute updates of directions to shelters and things like that can still be effective if those billboards are functioning. And if not, those people still have access to resources that they gained before the storm season started.
Thank you for that insight. I'm leaving it over to the other judges. Who wants to go first?
I got a real quick question, and I was thinking of the same thing, the power outages and how you were going to deal with the power outages, in particular to where the actual signs were and that are showing the QR codes. But I think you answered that question. Secondly, I noticed in your presentation, in your written presentation I have here, we're talking about in phase one, you're talking about 3 hours of when you're going to start activating these type of messaging and QR codes. In my experience, 3 hours, it's too late. Have you guys thought about making that like a 12-hour, 24-hour? Because we have plenty of warning when hurricanes, or you guys refer to them as cyclones, are headed our way. There's a lot more time associated with it. So have you thought about making that a much greater leeway, especially to allow the homeless population and the shelters to be ready for the influx of that homeless population?
Yeah, so in terms of the early warnings, we did initially consider in our devising of the solution to display warnings 24 hours before or the day before the event. However, the issue with that was that the city population was less likely to act on that information, and the 3-hour warning came from the Bureau of Meteorology updates that they provide. They send an alert to the Brisbane City Council 3 hours before a storm. So that's where that number came from. But we can also, there is obviously, due to the fact that it is such a flexible innovation, I guess, it's possible to further elaborate and decide to display warnings the day before or longer periods before, which can be decided on in the implementation phase during that establishment period and the preparation phase, where the Bureau of Meteorology would communicate with the Brisbane City Council to determine what the most effective time period is for those warnings.
And I'll just add in there that the frequency of storms in Brisbane, so even this week alone, we've had about 4 quite extreme storms. So they're very frequent and they're normally of an afternoon. So that's why we kind of thought the 3-hour period, that way it gave, because our city is quite small as well, a 1.6 kilometre radius. So that gives people enough time to find the shelter on the Ask Izzy maps or follow the directions. And it also gives the commuters the decision, are they going to stay at work for the next 3 hours or head home a bit earlier? So it's because Brisbane, the city itself, we don't have an extreme threat of cyclones or hurricanes, anything like that. It's normally these more frequent severe storms that we're addressing. But obviously it's transferable. So if it was in another city, we could, like if it was in the US, we could do the 24-hour before, like start the alerts earlier as well.
Liliana, thank you for sharing that information, because that was going to be one of my questions, so that I could appreciate the frequency and severity of these storm events. So if this were to occur in the last week, you would send this information or make this information available to the city with 4 different times. And I'm wondering if the community would then be desensitized to this information and fail to take action. Particularly the commuter community would have this disruption, but I'm wondering if there's a different consideration than for the homeless populations whose disruption may look a bit different.
Yes, so we were thinking that initially in the start of the storm season, we would display a bit more frequently those 3-hour warnings. And that way people can get those resources when there's that imminent threat at the start of the season, when there hasn't been many storms and they see, oh, there is a severe storm coming this afternoon, I will get on TransLink now and check that, or I will download the Prepared app and notify my family. That way in the future, they've already got that app now, they've learnt and they've already downloaded that preparedness resource, which is what we were having trouble with in Brisbane. People weren't taking the action in the months leading up to storm season because there wasn't that imminent threat that city dwellers wait for. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you for the interesting presentation. I think my questions are already quite in line with what has already been asked before. So maybe just asking for an additional layer of information. So it sounds like from the way this great system is set up, it integrates already existing services. But it also sounds like there is an assumption that everyone who gets this information has the ability to act on it. So maybe they're able-bodied people who could walk the 30 minutes or could drive themselves to wherever. So from a process perspective, what sort of things are you thinking about adding to those people who may not be able to act, maybe because they have limited mobility and couldn't get to a shelter in the right time?
I'm happy to answer that one for you. Key consideration or a key, I guess, benefit of our solution is the fact that it reduces the strain on those homeless services and other community services and the public transport system itself. So by having less inundation of those homeless services last minute, there are more resources available for people volunteering at those shelters or volunteering in other community services to go out and help those other people that do have those access problems, because they're not their time isn't being drained by the amount of overcrowding in their services.
Okay, so just to be sure, this is already built into your plan that there will be that kind of provision, or you are assuming that by having this freed up time, they will be able to do that?
In our research, one of the key facts that we found was that one of the large strains on those community services is that they often, when these severe storm events happen, they are deployed to go around the city and to support those who are in need and to find and to reach out to the people experiencing homelessness and to provide services to them. So some of those community services are already being deployed out into the community during these events. So it is partly an assumption that they will be able to also, I guess, divert their services into supporting those people who can't access that information. But the assumption is based on the fact that they have been going out and supporting people during these events, and the fact that they will have more capability to do so if there's less strain on their services.
And I'll just add in there that with the Ask Izzy website as well, so Ask Izzy works with like the St. Vincent de Paul's and lots of the homeless shelters in the city. They all work with Ask Izzy to develop the website. So in the map that they would develop under the storm resources, if there were issues with, if St. Vinny's shelter was getting notified that people were having trouble accessing, getting up that road to the shelter or to the church or the car park, then that information would be fed back to Ask Izzy to incorporate that into the billboard direction displays and the map on the website as well. So that would be in our 5 phase when we're trialing out, just to get that information.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for the presentation. I found it quite refreshing that you took on this particular issue of homelessness, which is complex. And so I sort of want to depart from that point. And just on to Noni's question about accessibility. So I have a very good friend who lives in Brisbane who is legally blind. And so there was a question about a lot of what you present is visual, and the consideration for people who might not immediately be able to see up front what is being displayed. There's a question there for me. But more importantly, I was really curious about why you chose homelessness. Is anybody in the team connected to the issue in any ways? I really like the multiplier effect. I could see how it spilled over onto the broader social system. I really enjoyed that. You'd obviously have to be in a smart city. It's not going to work so well in Cape Town, but I did appreciate that you showed that through the presentation. So is anybody connected to the issue? And what about people who cannot really access visual information?
So firstly, with the visual information, their own media does have, it's growing now, I think about 20 billboards across Australia that have an audio capability. So in some locations, they're trialing like a siren to alert of a storm or natural disaster. So that was definitely something that we did consider possibly using the audio once that is implemented in Brisbane. We don't have those capabilities yet with the bus stop billboards. And to answer the second half, Rachel, did you want to, or Augusto, do you guys? I've done some volunteering at some homeless shelters, and I don't know, just in the recent storm season when we were just discussing this, we were thinking like, it just kind of struck us like, oh my gosh, like what happens when we hadn't thought about it before, really. I think that's how it was kind of a shock. And
yeah, I think it wasn't so much as anyone had a particular personal connection to it previously, but once we were doing a bit of background research on storms in Brisbane, and it was something that kept coming up. And yeah, as Lily said, it was a bit of a realization for us when we thought, yeah, these storms just happen and we might be worried about moving our car so it doesn't get hailed on or something like that. But some people don't even have a roof over their head, and it kind of just really struck us and was something that we wanted.
Yeah, and also looking into like all the mental health effects and the illnesses that come from when they're staying out in the cold and getting wet, and then illnesses, the stress as well, and because some people become homeless because of natural disasters, so that's more trauma. And yeah, I think when we just dug into more research, we realized that it was a really significant issue.
I would like to add something. A few years ago, one member of my family, she had a mental disease. Well, we lost her in terms that we couldn't find her. After a while, we find out that she was on the street, living on the street. That's why we believe that it is important that those people have access to those public services.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's people who happen to be on the margins of society, and the solution actually speaks to everybody. So the benefit for the commuter who's typically going to work, I can see that, but the consideration and the for homeless people, I think, is quite powerful.
Absolutely.
I see, Maddie, so we're probably running out of time, but can I just ask one last question?
Yes.
One storm, two boats. What a catchy title. And I can't get it out of my head, but what does it mean? Can you give us a little bit of a flesh out kind of what you really meant with that title?
Yeah, so it's like there's one storm happening in Brisbane, but there's two boats. So there's people just trying to get home, worried about congestion. And then there's the other boat. They don't know where they're going to go, where they're going to get shelter. So it's two completely different circumstances, and we're trying to answer it with the digital connected smart billboards.
And Amadei, what an amazing question.
Thank you.
To end on, I am so sorry. I wish we could have more time to ask questions. What an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Real Consulting. I will be in touch with you, and of course you're going to be welcome to the final winning team announcement on November 17th, and we will work on setting up your mentoring session with one of our, or maybe two of our amazing judges. In the meantime, everyone, our next session is via the link or via your Zoom invitation, and we can head on over there presently. See you shortly. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.